Hello, everyone, and welcome to World History. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Today, we are going to be looking at the causes of exploration. Plus, we'll look at Christopher Columbus, too. Our essential question today, though, is why did Europeans embark on this exploration of the world? Why were they out there doing this? The story goes way back. Some context here. So ancient navigation was very different than the navigation of the Renaissance. Ancient seagoing vessels had been narrow open boats called galleys. And these galleys moved primarily with slave labor that was which rowed the boats. It took a lot of people to move these galleys. And they weren't great ships. They were not stable enough for ocean travel. The ancient peoples had not really figured out how to do deep water navigation. Now, when the Black Death comes around, we have this change because so much of the population has been wiped out by it that we no longer have enough people to stay at these oars and to row these boats. These boats become obsolete. We don't have the people to do them, and they weren't great for ocean travel anyway. So let's see what we can do. And in the 1400s, to the Portuguese, that meant inventing a new ship, the Caravel. Now, the Caravel was a direct result of one person's effort to build a new, better boat. And that was Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal. And he gathered together Europe's best people in the area of navigation and shipbuilding to create something new and different and better. And this caravel was smaller, it was faster, it was more maneuverable, and could hold more cargo than a galley because you didn't need as many people, right? People need to, one, exist, two, have a place to sleep. They need their stuff. You need food to feed those people. If you can have a boat that needs fewer people, all of a sudden you've got tons more space for cargo, for trade goods. Also, once you could fit cannon onto these ships, what the Portuguese did pretty quickly, it could dominate larger ships because it was more maneuverable. It was a more difficult target. It was faster. And the Portuguese really had a lot of success with the Caravel. Now, world geography. Great strides were being made in navigation and cartography, map making. We start to make much better maps. This is in part, largely, because Arab scholars are able to reintroduce Ptolemy's work to Europe and his knowledge of the stars and navigation. This Greek scholar had been lost to Europe for a long time, but preserved within Arab libraries. And Ptolemy used latitude and longitude to calculate distances on the map. Now, these different calculations in distance do cause a lot of confusion for some Europeans. The ancient mile being different than the modern mile. And Europeans weren't great at this early on. And they believed the world to actually be much smaller than it really is because of these errors in calculation. Now, other inventions also come to Europe around this time, including the magnetic compass, which was invented in China, and then reached Europe through trade and contact with Arab peoples who had brought it in from the Chinese. The compass is going to help sailors determine their direction. Now, the astrolabe was a Greek invention, so it had been around in Europe for some time. But the Arabs really perfected it and made it much more usable to navigators sailing around the world. And this is going to help sailors determine their distance north and south of the equator. So now they know how far north and how far south they are, and they know which direction they're sailing in. These are kind of important things if you don't want to get lost in the middle of an ocean. So this diffusion of science, like compass and this improved astrolabe, other advances also get borrowed from elsewhere. Europeans become really good at taking the ideas of other people and incorporating them and creating something new. These ideas included the sternpost rudder, which makes it easier to steer and direct a ship. This is borrowed from China. Lateen sails, that allows a ship to sail against the wind. This was an Arab innovation that the Portuguese then take. So these advancements move along these trade routes. One group of people see another group of people using it, start to think, hey, I wonder why they're doing that. They borrow that technology, and technology advances. So why then do they go out and explore the world? Well, in the 900s, religious fervor is part of it. Christians begin a series of wars to retake the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, from Muslims. And the Reconquista is completed in 1492. So in 1492, Spain and Portugal are no longer completely consumed with this reconquest of their peninsula. They now have control over it. And they've viewed themselves as very successful at spreading the religion and pushing Muslims out of the peninsula. Now the Christians in the Iberian Peninsula want to spread the faith even further. Okay, this has been their driving, unifying factor. Spread Christianity. So let's spread it other places as well. Ottoman Empire wasn't going to happen, though. Ottomans are way too strong. Where else could we spread our religion? So that's one of the reasons why Europeans are exploring. Another is a desire for profit. With the fall of Constantinople in 1452, Muslim powers had complete control of the Silk Road, right? They're going to be controlling access to those trade routes. Their taxes are going to be cutting into profits. If Europeans really want to make a profit on trade, they can't go through the Silk Road anymore. That is not profitable. So Europeans have to look elsewhere, and they start to explore the African coast as a part of this. Now, they do this because they want to reach the Spice Islands and China, India, and have access to those Eastern markets. But along the way, they're going to stop and they're going to trade in Africa and establish trading posts there as well. The other element is explorers and conquistadors, and the wealth and the fame and the power that they want for themselves. And each one of these explorers and conquistadors have slightly different reasons for doing it, but they're really summed up well by these three individuals. Bartholomew Diaz, who sailed for God and His Majesty. The idea of religion and his people, the Portuguese, that was why he took the risk and why he sailed. Vasco de Gama sailed for Christians and spices. Again, the idea of spreading Christianity, but also access to the spice trade in the Indian Ocean. And then you have the conquistador side, this fellow right here, Hernando Cortez, who sailed, quote, to win gold, not to plow fields like a peasant. That's just straight up, I'm doing this to get rich. Now, government power and an increase in government power allows this to happen. You need a strong government in order for these long voyages to happen. Now, how does that make sense? Well, governments like those in Spain and Portugal paid for the ships and sailors. Okay, there's huge risk in this. What if you sail off and you all die? Or what if you sail off and you make no money? It takes government backing for this to happen. And in Portugal, Prince Henry becomes the first to really finance large voyages. He sees an opportunity here, this fellow right here, to make money and to expand Portuguese power. It just takes that upfront investment. And once he starts to see success, Spain and others start to join in as well, throwing their power behind voyages. Now, the exploration then influences government ministers at home. You have cosmographers and geographers who receive powerful positions in government. See, their work is leading to success for the government. So they get promoted within that government, and in their new higher positions, they can influence more government policies. And these ministers really support these voyages, or they can deny ones as well. Now, in Portugal, these advisors warned the king away from this crazy idea from one of these voyagers, this Christopher Columbus guy. They said, that guy's crazy, his math is totally wrong, steer clear of him. So, how do we know who Christopher Columbus is? Well, his story dates back to Marco Polo. Marco Polo had first traveled to China back in the 1200s and came back with these stories that he'd heard about the wealth of Asia and his knowledge of a particular place called Cipango, which is modern Japan. Now, Marco Polo believed that Cipango was about 1,500 miles off of China's coast, so way off here, and kind of sitting in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or this ocean that they didn't name Pacific yet. Columbus believed that he could sail to Cipango and then on to Asia, and that would make his voyage possible. Now, the Portuguese say no. Christopher Columbus, this Italian sailor, had sailed for Portugal for a while, and he'd become one of their best captains. But when he came to the King of Portugal with this idea to sail to Cipango by sailing west, King John, the leader of Portugal, said, "Yeah, I believe that that's possible, but I think your math is wrong. I think it's going to take a lot longer than you think it's going to take." So Columbus is like, no, I have a plan. It can happen. We're going to do it. So he leaves Portugal and he takes his plans to Spain. And he goes to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella and says, "Hey, I believe that I can reach China by stopping at Cipango, by sailing west instead." And Spain says no, and then they say no, and then they say no, and they say, "Why do you keep coming back to us? No." Eventually they're like, "All right, fine, give it a shot." After 7 years of arguing, Spain decides to fund the voyage. This was after the Portuguese had had success in sailing around Africa, and Spain is starting to realize how far behind they are in the age of exploration. So Columbus leaves Spain in 1492 with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. Now, he is an expert navigator. Columbus is a lot of bad things, but he's also an expert navigator, and he does choose a very good route for crossing. He chooses a good time of year. They have favorable winds, good weather. It is an easy voyage, but it's a long voyage. And after 90 days, his men start to threaten him, start to threaten to take over the ship unless he turns around. Now, Columbus mollifies them by saying, 3 more days, give me 3 more days, and then we'll reconsider this mission. 2 days later, the lookout, the guy sitting up at the top of the mast, spots tree branches in the water. Now, how do tree branches get in the water? From trees. Trees grow on land, not on water. There must be land nearby. So he calls out, "Tierra, tierra, land, land. We are near land." And on October 12th, the ships do land in San Salvador. This is the name they give the island, Holy Savior in Spanish. And Columbus believes that he has reached the East Indies, a series of islands south of Japan. And he believes that Cipango must be near. On the island, the Spanish also meet the Taino, a native tribe of that region. And Columbus, believing himself to be in the East Indies, calls these people the Indians, a name that sticks to this day. That is all for today. I hope you learned something with this lesson, and I will see you next time. Farewell.